What did I learn doing software cost estimating? Big kind of software cost estimating thing that people who do cost estimating might want to know. And the other half of that is, what have I learned about software? Brooks' Law is dead. So we had to be concerned about things like that. So every company would have their own process, and I collected them like rare little butterflies. It's easier than ever to do software startup, which makes it more dangerous than ever to do a software startup. And I was shopping for an idea. I'm always shopping for ideas, and that just put a light bulb in my head.
That's Lee Fischman, entrepreneur and seasoned software estimating professional. Welcome to the Cost of Everything podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, and to share with your colleagues. Now for the interview. Thank you for joining me, Lee. We've been conversing backwards and forwards a little bit.
We have. Just sharing some jokes. Yep.
Yeah, jokes about Blenheim Palace, oranges,
Bath soap.
Alec Baldwin, but obviously that wasn't much of a joke. I really appreciate you joining me today in the first interview of 2021.
Right on. May this be a better year for us all.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly hope so. So I guess to get started, what is your background? How did you get into cost estimating?
By accident, like most of us. I went to University of Chicago and then to UCLA, and I studied economics at both schools, although my day job was as a programmer. So when I got out of UCLA, I went to the job board. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I saw a sign that said Sear Technologies, and I thought, I like technology, so I applied to it, and that turned out to be a costing company. In away I went.
You didn't know anything about what costing was, what they were costing, or what industry they were in?
I didn't know what the hell they were doing. It was just said Sear Technologies, and I liked technology, and Sear sounded really cool, so I applied.
And so you got into that. What industry or what kind of stuff did you work on?
Yeah, they produce a line of products for estimating the cost of software projects and various sorts of hardware projects, composites, manufacturing. And my background was in software, and that's naturally, well, I was involved in everything actually, but I gravitated more towards the software side and started as a consultant and moved over to product development.
So it's very much a data-driven kind of job, isn't it? So all the work that you would have been doing would have been quantitative. Quite a lot of difficulty in that in sort of R&D world. I guess within software, that would have been a changing kind of environment. You've got to balance that quantitative and that qualitative. And so does that make you more of a systematic person or someone who's artistic? I've always heard since I've been in estimating that it's not just a skill, it's an art. Where does that sit within the sort of software estimating environment you were working on?
Well, when you said that, the first thing I thought of was gardens, because we have French gardens and we have English gardens, and one is more artistic and one is more systematic. And to me, I'm sorry I answered you with a riddle, but I think there's, to directly respond, a lot of finesse in the estimating industry, because the data can be very cruddy, and you have to make leaps that can be artistic in nature, but ultimately wrangle you back, hopefully, to data. That's true in the data science world in general. We have to be creative in order to set things up, but you have to be systematic to follow through. So there's a mix of the two. The same goes for a lot of things. My other hat was in product development, where you have to first be artistic and then you need to be systematic in order to execute your vision. So it is a combination of the two that's required in many fields. I know medicine and law are the same things. You have to balance both. Some people in some specialties trend towards one or the other, but I think most of them are a mix.
When you're at that front end and it's all really fuzzy, how do you convince people to buy into the project? Like, is it always due to that bottom line, or is it what you promise?
What I learned in studying economics, or I shouldn't put it that way, what I was indoctrinated to believe in studying economics was that the entire world was a probability distribution, which drives my wife crazy, because if she asks me a question, I'll always say probably. And that's the world I see. And the same is true of cost estimation. You're never producing a point estimate. It's always an assessment of what the range is. And hopefully you have a shape to that distribution to better inform the likely outcome. But cost estimating is inherently uncertain. So you have to convey that to the customer as well, that you're never going to provide them with a single estimate, but with a range. And if they're estimating certain sorts of things like cost plus versus fixed price, or they have limited margin or more margin, they'll choose where they want to be in that range and assign, hopefully, the rest of it to a margin balance. And that's one of the keys in cost estimating for experienced project managers who rely on those estimates. They know that that range determines partially how much of a margin will be required in their projects.
It really depends who the customer is of the estimate, because then you're then going, are they, based on your experience working with them, are they more likely to anchor their thoughts and their decisions going forward on that first number you presented with them, or are they aware that it's a distribution and that it's a range and that can change over time? And given this new bit of information that I've got, I can now give you a better number. I can spend a bit more time and give you a better number. So I guess, well, I've got two things there really. One is, are you ever given the time to refine that number the way you want to at the next stage? And also, are you sure that the person receiving that number will not just say, well, that's not what you told me last time. That's way more expensive. What the hell do I do with that?
I'll try. That's a lot to unpack, and I'll do my best. Tell me if I succeed. So, first of all, when you provide a range, you're dealing with various customers who have different appetites for risk. So, depending on their appetite for risk and the structure of the contract, they will choose where they want to be in that probability distribution. Having been on the consulting side of this, I would say it's similar. You will give them an answer, but at a certain probability distribution. So they might desire an answer, but you'll have fixed in that an agreement on the probability you're delivering the estimate at. That being said, it depends on the type of project as well. Increasingly in software, in the IT and software world, we're not driven by estimates at all. We're driven by objectives and by deliverance of value. So you might set a budget at a certain amount, and then, the subtext to all this is agile. But the truth is, this came before agile. You just have that scope, and you'll deliver to the extent that your scope requires. I mean, I used to work as a programmer at American Express years ago, and it was never a question of budget, ever. It was a question of building what we could, and them giving us more money to do that. Budget came into play when we had portfolios of applications, and then they'd want to know what the highest cost benefit of the applications were. But once they were committed, budget would go out the window. So it depends on a lot of circumstances. For government relations, government has an arm's length relationship with its contractor and with congressional obligations here in the United States. They care about having specific estimates, and they want them to be reliable, so they'll choose 70, 80%. On the commercial side, in portfolio management, they'll choose estimates at whatever level they do in order to choose between projects. And then for other organizations, they don't even care about an estimate. They'll just go forward and do it because the benefit's much greater than the cost, and they can argue a higher budget to their executives on that basis.
Is that due to different objectives?
That's exactly right. Different objectives and different regulatory background. So, like I mentioned, in congressional level projects, major flagship projects, you'll have to honor specific commitments in budget. In defense in general, they have specific goals in mind for budget, and they have to come to an agreement. They have an arm's length relationship. Tools like the ones I worked on mediate that arm's length relationship with the estimate. That's not a rule in every industry.
I mean, you have say a government that's a set budget, potentially an arbitrarily set budget, not necessarily for the value that they want to achieve or the quality that they want to achieve. And then separately, you have, on the commercial side, you have, shareholders. It's mostly about growth, getting a larger portion of the market share. There's an idea of what the bottom line is, but the Amazon model obviously shows that it's not necessarily, and startups in general, I guess, it's not necessarily about the bottom line. It's about get your product out there, get it turned around quickly, and get it out there.
Right.
There's that difference in objective. Does that mean that governments are operating inefficiently? They're potentially getting shortfalls in output from their subcontractors.
No.
Because no. Okay.
No. I'll stop you right there.
Yeah. Cool.
No, I don't believe that there's any sort of value difference in these different domains. In fact, there's so much churn in the commercial sector. One might argue that the lesser value is being delivered in the commercial sector. Private equity funds or venture capital funds, I should say, they play a game where they'll put out $1 billion in a portfolio, and they'll expect that 9/10 of that will fail. They're waiting for the unicorn in that portfolio, which will guarantee the return with the other failures. So there's a tremendous amount of churn. When you have it on the government side, they're prioritizing based on need and value, and they have a limited budget, and they need to show value on the budget they have. So there's no churn. There's no private equity model or a venture capital model. Both apply where they're expecting a lot of failure. They're not expecting failure on the government side. So I would argue that the value is higher, believe it or not.
I guess the other side of it is
not value, value for money.
No, yeah, value for money. I think that's a key point. But where do you see, I guess the way you traditionally look at this, I don't know, indoctrinated with the economic theory from Chicago, famed Chicago University.
Well, there were a lot of Marxists at Chicago as well.
I was going to say famed, but yeah, okay. Not necessarily to go into the politics or the.
Oh, I'd love to.
I don't have the bandwidth for that.
No, it's okay.
But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is this sort of unlimited growth model and the commercial side of it. Is that allowing software development to grow in the right way, wherever you would define as right?
That's a huge philosophic question, and I only mentioned two aspects of this: government versus private funding. I did not mention that in the interior solution, which are enterprises that are underway, or even enterprises that have just started inside, like I said, the interior solution. Of course, you're aiming towards highest value there. And so the average enterprise, which is well established, whichever they are, versus government, I think probably you have the same level of value delivery within both of those.
But then you got traditional enterprise, and then you got new startups. And I know, obviously you've worked in, growing companies, you've worked in consultancy, you've worked at, you're facing traditional clients, and you're involved in startups.
Right, all of them, yeah.
What are the key differences you've seen in terms of, I guess, from the specific perspective of a cost estimator, and the role within each of those organizations? Are there different motivators for the estimator as well?
Yeah, I think so. In the government world, I think the cost estimator is brought in afterwards to cost projects that have been identified as ones that should be pursued. In the established enterprise world, and that might be within agencies of government as well, where they have internal projects, they're going to use cost estimators to value their portfolios and to rank the portfolios based on benefit cost analysis. In startups, they're going to be focused on value. So they'll have funding, whatever that is, and they're going to deliver to the value they can. So they'll prioritize strictly on that. And then in other enterprises, I think it's similar to what it might be in government, where they're just, I kind of said that, they're managing to their portfolio.
It sort of aligns with that traditional model, doesn't it? And those organizations have learned from each other as well, and try to apply similar similar lessons as well.
What
I
is the
guess,
traditional model?
I mean, I'm coming from the perspective of infrastructure. So infrastructure delivered traditionally would have been large government-run organizations who then subcontract works potentially, whereas
Yes.
now it's sort of outsourced. So it's sort of managed by a private organization. It's funded by the government and it's delivered the supply chain. And that would be sort of where we are with infrastructure. Not going into the complexities of different suppliers from different countries who
Not just that,
aren't
it's
run by
heavily political.
governments.
And it's heavily political. I keep on
Yeah,
harking back to BCA, but truly it's political.
it is. How do you see things have changed? So, I guess going back to one of the questions I wanted to ask you originally is,
Yeah.
given you've experienced the transition from traditional software estimating to modern day startups, what are your key experiences? What lessons can we take away from that? And what things don't hold now that we traditionally would have looked at as a rule
Well,
of
there's two
thumb?
sides to that. One is, what did I learn doing software cost estimating? Big kind of software cost estimating thing that people who do cost estimating might want to know. And the other half of that is, what have I learned about software? So I'll start with my most controversial assertion. There's something called Brooks' Law, which is returns to scale. And Brooks argued that the returns to scale were essentially above one. And I don't believe that holds true anymore. I don't know when it did, but I certainly don't believe anymore. So as systems get bigger, the argument goes, it takes more and more people to build the systems. So the exponent would be greater than one. And
So Brooks' law, which is that if you add resource to a project which is late, you'll make it later.
right, the mythical man month. And I for one do not believe that it's still true. And I've seen enough data to show me that it applies still in certain domains, aerospace and defense chiefly, and those specialized applications that they build. But I don't believe that holds true commercially. I think it's the exponent's below one. There's actually, believe it or not, seemingly increasing returns to scale. At least the data show that. There can be issues with the data, but thus far that seems to be consistent.
Is that a particular resource? Is it a developer's resource, or is it another type of resource that has
You mean
made that
what's
go
driving
one?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, learning. It could be learning that teams are getting the experience on the job where they're getting more and more efficient, and reuse may be increasing more and more. Reuse is very important. And it could be that they're benefiting significantly from reuse on their own projects. It's hard to say because this is scoping with the size of the project. But to my mind, this is a relationship, I just say, that varies with the size of the project. But from what I've seen, it's probably a mixture of learning and reuse.
If a project that was planned to take, I don't know, 6 months started to look in month 4 like it was going to take another 2 months, you could throw a proportionate amount of extra resource at it and it will bring it back in line, or is
Yeah,
that?
when I first started my life as a software developer, I would have probably not been shown my second interview if I'd said, "Yeah, just throw more people at it." But now I actually believe that. I think if a project's over and if it's sufficiently well defined, following good systems engineering principles with defined interfaces and uh, pieces of the product that are sufficiently drilled down, I'm referring to microservices and such, then yes, you can add more people and you'll get it done faster.
A good way to start 21, which is with controversy. We like that in this modern day and age. So,
Go for it. I'm a
um,
disruptor, I guess. Didn't
so
start
yeah,
out that way.
we'll raise a few eyebrows. I guess is this sort of the myth of agile productivity?
Yeah, I don't.
Um,
Well, that's different. The myth of agile productivity that we were talking about before. I think it's true now of any kind of software you develop. I don't think it's down to agile. Agile is different. I mean, we'll talk about that for a second if you like, this myth of agile productivity. So this is an old thing, and I don't think really anyone really questions this anymore. But maybe I need to say it just in case someone does. When agile first started out, there was a question about whether it was more productive. And no one who's involved, I'm a professional Scrum product owner, okay? So I know agile a little bit. And there's no one in Agile itself or in Scrum or any of those methodologies, frameworks, I should say, that claims they're more productive. They're not. They're focused on delivering value. They're no more productive. They never have been. So Brooks' Law is not being beat up by Agile. Brooks' Law is being beat up by the ongoing march of technology in general, I think.
When you're potentially providing these estimates, you want that real time, almost real time. Okay, here's what we're trying to do, and if the rate of technology improves for, say, site surveys, BIM outputs for producing a design or an intelligent piece of software, if the same amount of investment, and it's something that does get left behind in a lot of organizations, is what we're doing with cost estimating is seen as fairly traditional. If that gets left behind, then you providing timely information, it becomes more and more of a challenge because all these other areas have greater productivity.
That's something at Galrath, which was quite fascinating because on the manufacturing side, we've got Industry 4.0. The U.S. Air Force just delivered an aircraft in a year. 1 year took them from concept to flight, and we had to be concerned with that. On the that's the hardware model. On the manufacturing side, there's been tremendous growth in tools like CATIA and SolidWorks and things like that. So they've revolutionized manufacturing and software. Which I was mainly responsible with, and I was describing Brooks' Law is dead. So we had to be concerned about things like that, and developments in component-based architectures and things like that, where people are doing more gluing things together than actually coding. So the developments in many industries are providing a great challenge to cost estimators. You can't rely on historical stuff as much.
Something that I've found is what's people's competence for using all these tools, and how do people cope with that changing environment, and not necessarily knowing which skill that they actually need to have and to invest in their time and effort in developing, because again it is sort of that rate of technology increases.
So for cost estimating, right?
Yeah, and then there's often leaps, isn't there, within a short amount of time.
I think that it says, someone who says they've got 20,000 points, some say a vendor, software estimating vendor, that's not really relevant. What's relevant is how recent your information is, and how you're able to account for the march of time, because these things don't happen overnight. We observe time-based trends. And so if you properly trend your data, you can even take advantage of further back information, but you have to, and you take advantage by providing that trend in productivity to inform yourself of what the future curve is. We didn't get, like I say, to Industry 4.0 overnight. And so as you're able to do that, to the extent you're able to do that, you can continue to be relevant. You can't linearly project from the past to the future. You have to non-linearly project, and that will rescue you from a lot of situations.
You've got a lot of organizations out there that can do software cost estimating and just cost estimating in general, producing software to support cost estimating within different industries.
Yes.
But it's quite fickle, really, isn't it? Because it's quite clearly, if someone like SolidWorks or Autodesk, CATIA or whatever, come out and just say, we know how to do estimating, here's a module, and it blows everyone else out the water.
Oh, well, that's certainly potential. These companies, the established companies, sell to specific markets. Where they don't sell, for example, is into agile teams that are underway. That's that whole discussion about Monte Carlo. That's where that plays in estimating, release schedules and things like that. Wideband Delphi, which has been around forever, has found a new home. It's called planning poker, and I don't think half the people who do planning poker know that it's wideband Delphi. But yeah, I mean, so I did that little excursion. Let me reel myself back. There is a place for each of these things. So software estimating tools have evolved to serve certain audiences and only go so far. And then there's a whole nother world where they're not applicable, where you use the tools I just mentioned, the wideband Delphi and Monte Carlo, to get yourself to the last mile. And I didn't completely answer your question. Your question was about whether these tools, I think, can defend themselves. They have a sufficient moat versus other tools that have a tremendous and very specific set of value criteria that can't be replicated, like an Adobe.
What's to stop a particular software provider who are a large organization or something just saying, here's a bunch of money, go ahead and develop this tool or this particular module that will then allow people to do estimating?
Yeah, like Jira, which is a big tool for tracking software projects. They can easily take the 30% of the market they've got and own it just like that. But the tools that I just mentioned are not selling to those people. They're selling to specific circumstances of arm's length relationships or portfolio management, where they want estimates upfront and they don't have sufficient data. On the government side, that might be changing. There are new government rules on data recording. And so I think all the firms are probably going to have to contend with the fact that within the government, they're learning how to estimate on their own. So it might not be new tool development. It might be that there's more data available to the people who actually needed the estimates in the first place, sufficiently that they could do the work on their own.
All this data, which if it's drinkable, it's a lot to take in. And it's almost like, well, there's a new layer there. Complexity that adds a different dimension to our estimating, because you can then start to access other sources of data that you might traditionally not have had. But then there's a cost to processing that. So you almost need to be a data scientist as well to enable you to do that. And
right,
or
it's
you
make versus buy decision, and oftentimes we've sold to companies who could have done it in house, but they were faced with a make versus buy decision, and we provided them with a solution that was turnkey, and that's oftentimes what stops companies from developing their own anything. It's cheaper to buy it.
And I think it sort of aligns with something you mentioned before, when we had our previous discussion, which was about the commoditization of components.
Yeah. When I first started, I'm trying to tie this back to estimating, and there is a way to do that. But I'll explain first what we were talking about. When I started working in this industry, I was consulting. And thereafter, I interfaced a lot with customers, and for a while, I even collected their processes. So every company would have their own process, and I collected them like rare little butterflies. The funny thing is that that's all been replaced. So now no one's got their own variation of a process. I mean, completely different process, I should say. Now they're all doing SAFe or Scaled Agile or Scrum, and they'll modify them to suit their needs, but they're all basically following the same frameworks. And then on the technical side, a lot more systems were bespoke in previous years than now. Now, it started with the enterprise service bus being able to tie things together and move to microservices and everything. So you now have companies that are not their own little Petri dishes. Now you've got companies that share between one another all the things that they do, share technology, share methodologies, and share people, because it's a much more fluid labor market as well. So in a way that makes estimating easier. Tying it back to estimating, that makes estimating easier. I can tell you what it's going to cost in one enterprise because it's probably going to cost similar amount in another enterprise, because they're sharing so much now.
Will that eventually lead to another jump then, in terms of innovation?
There has been a jump in innovation. In terms of startups and everything like that, it's easier than ever to do software startup, which makes it more dangerous than ever to do a software startup because the barriers to entry are so low. But it creates a huge jump in innovation within the companies themselves. In my previous life working in the New York financial industry, every new system was a huge endeavor, and there's still big endeavors, but they're made much smaller by the fact that so much is coming from off the shelf. It is so easy to build stuff now. You just glue things together, and you have to develop the business logic on your own, and that's an important and major piece of it. But much of it just comes together.
What is the map of love?
Ah, yes. So I was doing serious work all my whole life. And then one day I was at dinner a few years back, and the question came up, you've heard that question before, right? Where have you met? And I was shopping for an idea. I'm always shopping for ideas. And that just put a light bulb in my head. And I kept that light bulb dimly lit for years. And then I managed to break my ankle, which was a lot of fun, but it gave me a lot of extra time. And that's where I started this idea. That's the background of why the heck I'm doing that. The map of love is go to where everyone out there, stop what you're doing, open your browser, go to wherewemet.org and enter your love story. And that's what it is. I'm trying to build a worldwide map of love. It's a .org for a reason, because the goal is it's a passion project. It's my chance to hopefully move the world a slightly little bit in the right direction, as much as technology could ever do that. I want to create a worldwide map of love, showing where you met your significant other, where you met the professor you love, where you met your cat, the greatest meal you ever had. It's where we met. Really, truly focused on love stories. But I'm open to additional where we met stories as well. But I want people to be able to go around the world, and it's already translated into 5 languages, the site, and with automatic translation for 130 more languages, and enter their stories. Wouldn't it be great if one day an Israeli could go and look at all the love stories in the West Bank, or vice versa, or someone in some war-torn region of Africa or other parts of the world can go and see what people they're supposed to hate, what their love stories are. That's the goal of this worldwide map of love, to bring understanding through stories of commitment to one another, because that's what binds us all. How's that for us?
Yeah, no, I love that.
It's a small goal. You've got to put your love story up there.
I will do. I will do. Yeah, I had a quick look, and not many from the UK at the moment. I noted the one for Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's up there.
Yeah, so I put the purple hearts are the love stories that I fished out and wrote myself, and they're beautiful stories.
No, it's really cool. I mean, everyone's got a story to tell on that, so it'd be really. I'm assuming yours is up there as well.
Yes, but I'm not telling you where it is.
Oh, I'm gonna have to search through. There was 100 in North America, so I'm gonna have to search through all of them.
Yeah, we just got some from the Nordic countries. I'm so pleased about that.
Got a couple of Swedes.
Yes.
So, what's the most interesting one on there at the moment, do you think?
Oh, I think the ones I wrote. No, there's some cool ones in the United States. Like there's one in the Southwest, I think, that I really liked. I'm blanking on the names and everything, but I remember most the ones, they're in Purple Hearts, that I put in just to get people interested in the idea. They were labors of love, like Frida Kahlo was a beautiful story. And Diego Rivera, that was just a beautiful story. And the one about Leonard Cohen, I actually spent some serious time researching these stories because they were so beautiful. And they're kind of my flagships that I put in there to encourage people to kind of write to their heart's extent. Those are my favorites, honestly, because I remember them the best, and they're beautiful. That's why they stood the test of time, these stories.
Absolutely. No, that's I think
my mother-in-law's was great.
Yeah, don't forget your mother-in-law.
Okay, go to Cuba. Anyone who's listening, wherewement.org, go to Cuba, and you'll see my mother-in-law's love story. It's a beautiful story.
I guess a couple of more questions. One, sort of other interests. I mean, we mentioned the map of love, but so what are your other interests?
Oh my God, I have weird interests that bear no resemblance to my professional obligations. You and I share something in common, except you actually worked in the industry, and I'm merely interested. Nuclear energy. I'm a proponent because I've always been an environmentalist, and I think the future, as much as it's our portfolio is going to be heavily invested in wind and in solar and in wave energy, and we're making great progress there. But I am just tickled by the developments in small modular reactors and hopefully eventually molten salt reactors. I think there's going to be huge development. Rolls-Royce is doing great work on your side of the pond, and TerraPower here, and there's a bunch of players. There's huge amounts of investment being made.
There's one guy in particular, I won't mention his name, but back at Rolls-Royce, who, if he's listening, would have a big smile on his face that you mentioned molten salt.
Oh my God. Are you familiar with the high thermal cycle on the molten salt reactors? So to anyone who's listening, it's possible to run at a higher temperature, literally, and burn up much more of the fuel. So that takes care of the entire waste problem. Plus, you get way more out of every given a quantity of fuel, way more.
These are the so-called Gen 4. They're actinide burners. So it's very interesting in terms of what it does to the nuclear waste equation.
Right, the actinide burners. I mean, some of that was done, I think, with the breeders in the French industry a little bit, but this is another level. They have some big problems to solve first. Pulling, purifying the fuel out of the salts, and also some heavy issues with the materials. Even though it was done successfully on the U.S. side years ago, there's still some significant engineering issues to resolve. So in the short term, small modular reactors are the game.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna steer you away from small modular reactors because I've done a podcast on that.
I know.
I guess the only thing left really, and this is something that I'm adding to 2021, is what's the one takeaway message you would give for the listeners who are interested in the stuff around software cost estimating, but generally around from your experiences of estimating? Yeah,
don't trust the experts. I think there are a lot of truisms that have been passed around over the years in software cost estimating by a whole host of people. And I think this is probably a lesson that goes beyond software cost estimating. Rely on first sources, people who publish data, and have it reviewed and have reproducible results. The software estimating shops are all moving in that direction. In my time at Galrath, we moved to a heavily data-driven approach because we knew people would increasingly demand it. And my feeling is that that should be true of anyone who portrays themselves as an expert. If they're an academic and they published and they're peer-reviewed and you can reproduce their work, great.
I really enjoyed that. There was so much to take away from that chat with Lee. I think one of the things for me was that the rules of thumb we use in our analysis are dependent on a lot of variables. And in a changing world, we need to constantly understand the impact on those things that we may have grown accustomed to becoming constants. The next episode, I'll be flying solo, reviewing some of the latest research and some of the key thinking around estimating that's currently doing the rounds. Until then, thanks for listening, please stay safe and have a great week.